The meeting to order, November 4th, Wilton Board of Education regular meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review the agenda?
Yes.
Is there a motion to approve it?
So moved.
Thank you, Glenn. Second? Laura, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we've approved it. Comments from the public. This is where I remind people that each public comment is limited to 2 minutes, and that the Board of Ed, while it might be frustrating, does not respond directly, but will follow up if necessary. And 15 minutes is allotted to any one topic. Tonight, in Lucille's absence, Superintendent Smith has agreed to read public comment.
Great. So if we have anyone in the room that's going to offer public comment?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Yes,
May I go?
absolutely.
Thank you. In light of the recent elections and the FOIA requests, which allowed for personal and sensitive material pertaining to underage children to be printed in our local media, I believe that if this practice continues, it will discourage well-intentioned and qualified citizens from running for any voluntary board position in the future. This will negatively affect not only our town, but more specifically, and with much more negative consequences, our children and their education. Our school board should reconsider this divisive and politically motivated practice going forward. Thank you.
Name and address.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, Jess,
Jess,
can you just
for the
identify yourself?
record.
Oh, yes.
Thanks.
Jess Crust, 12 Cochran's Place.
Thank you. Any other in-person comments? Jen?
Wait,
What?
do you want to go first?
I have, no, go ahead. I have a half dozen written comments.
Okay. Can I stay here? Can I sit here and talk? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're doing this as
You're
public
doing this as an
comment?
individual? It's my own public comment.
Okay.
Do you want me to stand somewhere else?
Go ahead, just for the optics, I guess. That would be better.
Jennifer Lawler, 40 Mulbrook Drive. While it may be legal to FOIA parent-teacher communication, many, and I hope most, would argue it's not ethical. Our families and teachers need to be able to have open, honest communication without the fear of someone else accessing that information and publishing it. I'm honestly not sure what's worse, the fact that members of our community FOIA'd emails between a parent and teacher and ultimately had them printed in the local media, or the fact that no one along the way said this isn't right and put a stop to it. Our district has put a lot of time, thought, and money into developing the portrait of a graduate. Among the many attributes in the portrait of a graduate are to be a courageous, ethical leader and an active, socially sensitive citizen. Our schools are trying to teach our children to look at multiple viewpoints about topics and events being taught, to gather all the information in an accepting way, and then allow them to formulate their own opinion. Kids learn by example. What are we teaching them? Our board consists of 6 volunteers. Who would ever want to volunteer now for a position in which this can happen and people allow it to happen? Treating volunteers this way clouds everything we pledge to accomplish and represent as a board. Moving forward, I hope our community will stand up to protect our children and teachers.
Thank you. Any other in-person comments? Okay, Dr. Smith.
Great. If it's okay, I'm going to remove my mask because I have a bunch to read tonight.
And it's much easier to talk that way.
Okay, so the first public comment is from Andrew Warren, 266 Mountain Road. Andrew writes, "Good evening. I'd like to share some of my views as a parent of a current student in the Wilton school system. It's no surprise to say that we're living in a very politically charged environment. We can all point fingers to why that is. I do believe that we all have the same goal in mind, to provide the best education for our children and to prepare them to be successful in the future. However, there are clearly very different views on how this is achieved. Given the politically charged environment that we live in, it is difficult to write a letter such as this and not have it be viewed as a political statement, and therefore simply dismissed by one party or the other. I would hope that most people want their children to have an education that is free from political bias or leaning. I believe that critical thinking is one of the most important things that we can teach our children, and to bias them with political views is damaging and not fair to them. It has been alarming to learn of children in our schools being called racist merely because of their parents' political affiliation. In my view, the focus of teaching diversity and inclusion has been on gender, ethnicity, and sexual orientation. Diversity of thought appears to have been completely forgotten and in many cases labeled racist merely because of party affiliation. I would ask that the board consider diversity of thought when making the decisions that impact the education of our children. I would also like to address some public comments that were made recently. As I said in the beginning of my comments, we are in a very politically charged environment. The fact that the Board of Education is now a politically charged board is very concerning as a parent of a child in our school system. When the chair of the Democratic Town Committee touts the majority of Democrats on the board, it is very concerning. The recent quote by Nicola Davies after winning a seat on the board is also concerning to me. Nicola stated in part, the voters made it clear what values they are looking for in their representatives. I would caution the board to not view the recent victory as a clear statement of what values the parents of children in our school system are looking for. Further, I would hardly call a victory by a margin of approximately 270 votes a clear indicator of what Wilton parents value. I also want to address the requirement for our children to wear masks while at school. I understand that the board currently has no choice in this matter. However, it appears likely that this decision will be in front of the board in the next several months. I encourage you to read the studies regarding the harm that masking our children can do. Our children live most of their lives outside of school unmasked, and they should not be required to wear them while at school. Lastly, I would like to again reiterate that I believe that we all have the same common goal of providing the best education for our children. I ask that you please seriously consider these comments as well as any other comments that are received that are not consistent with your views. I believe that these discussions, the diversity of thought, will help us to achieve our common goal. Regards, Andrew Warren. This next letter is from Catherine Ambrose. I don't have an address for Catherine. As we enter the 20th month of the COVID pandemic, a group of Wilton parents have joined efforts to question school mask requirements and request that the Wilton Public Schools make masking optional. We see and hear our children struggling wearing masks, whether it be extreme exhaustion, headaches, or chronic stuffy noses, frequent distracting prompts during class to pull their masks over their nose, getting called to the office for improper mask wearing, or getting off the bus with wet, dirty masks. See this, in parentheses, she writes, see this analysis of masks that found dangerous pathogens on worn masks. Outside of school, we see our children hanging out with friends, playing sports, in parentheses, watch the winning interception and ensuing celebration at homecoming at this past weekend to see kids being kids, and running around on the playgrounds all without masks. The struggle masked children face could be seen at the October 7th Board of Education meeting when the person reading public comments appeared to be getting out of breath as she read them. At one point, she apologized, pulling her mask away from her nose and mouth, saying, "I'm sorry, hot." This was after about 5 minutes of reading. Our children are masked at school for 6.5 hours a day. Recent reports are now coming out showing the burden that COVID and the fear surrounding it have placed on student emotional mental health. Pediatricians call mental health crisis among kids a national emergency, October 20th, 2021. Young people have endured so much throughout this pandemic, and while much of the attention is often placed on its physical health consequences, we cannot overlook the escalating mental health crisis facing our patients. Quote by American Academy of Pediatrics President Dr. Lee Savio-Beers. Impact of COVID-19 on poor mental health in children and young people. Tip of the iceberg, October 4th, 2021. It has been a long 18 months for all of us, especially children. With nationwide lockdowns and pandemic-related movement restrictions, children have spent indelible years of their lives away from family, friends, classrooms, play, key elements of childhood itself, said UNICEF Executive
Kevin,
Director.
There's about 15 seconds left, so I don't know
There's quite a bit more. How about I'll just finish this last bullet, and then you'll receive all this. It'll become part of the minutes.
if,
Okay, so the last one
Well,
here.
go over a few seconds, but go ahead.
Okay. Children and teens have
Logical
suffered
place.
immensely during the COVID-19 pandemic, October 8th, 2021. Changing school and family routines, isolation at home, illness or loss of a family member, stressed parents, and fear of the virus itself have hit kids hard. Why don't I just do this last paragraph here? Child COVID deaths across the nation have been low. As of October 29th, there have been 780 deaths among children ages 0 to 17, among 5.4 million cases, representing 0.01%. Annualizing this rate over 19 months would put COVID-19 deaths for children as the 8th leading cause of death in the country, behind accidents, suicides, and heart disease. Childhood deaths in Connecticut have also been very low. As of October 28th, there has been 1 death among children ages 0 to 9 and 4 deaths among children ages 10 to 19. We realize that every death is tragic and we are in no way minimizing them. However, as stated above, the emotional health of children needs to be taken into account when implementing school-wide policies. So the letter goes on, and there's a list of footnotes. I think Lucille was going to send all of that to you, so you have everything plus the footnotes. This next one is from Linda DiMatteo Delapine. Good day. I'm writing today in regards to the continuing masking of our children. Science shows that children are highly unaffected by COVID. I, for one, do not know any child that has been damaged by this illness, but I do know many that have been damaged by vaccines. My concern here is that I was told by a BOE member that the children would be unmasked when the vaccine is approved for their age. Does this mean our children will be forced to get this brand new shot so they can come to school without a mask? This is no different than holding a gun to someone's head to get them to do what you want them to do. Will the BOE accept responsibility for children's deaths and/or health consequences now and in the future if this becomes their plan? Regardless, the masks need to come off. The children are psychologically impacted by this. They need to see faces and expressions. They need to be able to breathe oxygen, not their respirated carbon dioxide. They are questioning the rhetoric themselves. They don't understand why they can go everywhere else and be in crowds without masks on, but at school they need to wear one for 8 hours. Other towns in Connecticut have lifted this mask mandate of school children. Wilton itself does not have a mask mandate. Why is this continuing? Forced masking is abusive. It is mentally and psychologically and physically abusive by cutting off facial communication while making it harder to breathe. A study published in the Journal of American Medical Association shows that out of 45 school children, ages 6 to 17 years, 100% reached at least 4 times the OSHA permissible limit of CO2 exposure in just 9 minutes, with the highest readings coming from the youngest children. This will cause irreversible brain damage. CDC stats show the age group 0 to 19 infection fatality rate is close to 0%. Survival rate is 99.97%. Please share the attached images so everyone can see it's not just a mask, it's much more than that. And we owe it to our children to give them their health and lives back. Warm regards, Linda A. DiMatteo, 252 Mountain Road. She also had a series of attachments that we'll make sure you have and we'll publish. This next one is from Justina Nerzik to Board of Education. I'm writing this letter to stand against masking kids regardless of their vaccination status. We gave you the right to decide about our kids' future. However, you are not listening to parents' opinion. You follow your own agenda, science without any basis, and so-called safety of our kids. Have you sent the survey to parents asking what they think about masking their kids? I heard your answers already. There is the executive order from Lamont office, or there are parents that want masking for everyone. I want to remind you that you represent all the parents. Therefore, you should stand up against masking our kids. We should be given the choice. If one feels safer with the mask, that is their choice, but don't impose it on all kids. Let me say it again. You should stand up for our kids. Don't bury behind executive order. You are the one who sees our kids struggling mentally, psychologically, and physically. Start representing the parents and their kids. Start questioning the science, because I don't know why our kids are suffering from the most if they have the lowest fatality rates. According to the CDC website, the age group from 0 to 19 infection fatality rate is almost 0%, and survival rate is 99.7%. Kids are staying 6 to 8 hours daily in their masks. Have you reviewed the impact of masks on our kids, or do you only follow what you were told? Recently, middle school reduced mask breaks. Are you staying 8 hours daily in the mask, or when you are sitting at your desk, you remove it? How do you think kids can focus all day? Do you think kids don't need to breathe? It is okay for you, but not for them. Think about the policies that you are creating. We all want the best for our kids. I trust that you won't blindly follow what is imposed on our kids, but question it, research it, and stand up for our kids. Every human being should have a freedom of choice. Thank you, Justina Nerzik. This next letter is from Sarah Hames, 14 Pinoak Lane. She writes, the time has come to unmask our children in school. This virus does not affect them, and if it does, it is usually so mild that it is less severe than the common cold. They are all around town unmasked, both indoors and outdoors, spending time with friends and families indoors, but the only place they are focused to mask is in school. My children are confused and do not want to wear a mask. There is no mask mandate in Wilton, and other counties have lifted the mandates in school. My son has severe anxiety and fear from not being able to see friends and faculty's faces and expressions. This is damaging to their mental health. Suicide rates in children in the past year have skyrocketed, and they should not live in fear any longer. My kindergartner told me that she can't touch her friends outside, which is bonkers to limit children from physical play. They already have so many rules to abide by in school, and this is getting out of control. Let them be little kids and play with their friends. Give a 5-year-old a hug when the busing company loses her on the bus, for goodness sakes. That's it. This next one is from Jolanta Namowitz to Wilton BOE. I want to let you know that I am against the mask mandate at school for my children. I am pro-choice and I believe in no discrimination in this matter, regardless of the vaccination status. It is beyond my understanding why my child must be masked at school setting with no mask breaks given, besides the recess, lunch, and snack time. While he meets his Wilton friends at play dates at various houses, no masks there. I want my voice to be heard and taken into consideration. Again, I want to have a choice if it comes to my children. I do want the best for them, and I will be standing with them if I feel the need. Please let us, the parents, have a choice regarding masks at schools. This last one is from Kim Hall, 300 Thayer Pond Road. This comment is simply to say a thank you. I'd like to thank Glenn Hemmerly and Laura Schwem for their years of service. I really appreciate the thoughtful, nonpartisan commitment both have shown to improving the schools for all our kids over the years. Our schools and our towns are better for their efforts. That's all the public comment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other-
Guys, sorry, we have public comment as well.
Yes,
Is that all right?
yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you. So, good evening, folks. One of the things that I think we can all appreciate is that we understand at this point that whether vaccinated or unvaccinated, you can still carry and be a transmission vector of the virus. So therefore, my question to the board is, what are you doing to consider and adversely testing and adversely selecting only unvaccinated students and vaccinated teachers and vaccinated parents when we know that both can actually carry the virus? And when will we end this medical like delineation, if you will? So that would be one. Second, apologies, is I asked for the district relative group data. My understanding, Chuck Smith, Dr. Chuck Smith, you mentioned it in the September 2nd interview or board meeting that you had that data. When does the town get to see that? I think we would like to see that. I think we deserve to see that. You know, this is public information. If the question is, like, do I have to put a Freedom of Information Act request out there in order to get that information, then I shall do that. But I think that should be something that would be proactively put out there for the parents to see. And the last would be the adverse testing requirements, and I think that kind of goes with the first one. So, you know, the testing, but I'm sorry, so it actually goes directly with the first one. So just making sure that we are symmetrically looking at this information based on the actual science and saying, what are we doing? Last question would be, what is our exit strategy from this? So I see even today, Lamont, Governor Lamont is actually looking at different ways to start to exit out of this. We've seen this out of Massachusetts. We've seen this out of multiple states. Do we have a working group? And if not, why not? I would really appreciate that the administration and the Board of Education address these issues because, you know, at the end of the day, my daughter her entire experience in public schools has been through a mask, has been through this COVID world. What are we doing? How do we leave this? What's our exit strategy? What are our metrics? What are our measurements? So I would really appreciate you guys to be able to define those. Thank you.
Name and address.
Thank you. Oh, wait, sorry, name and address as well?
Sir?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, Deb Lowe. My name is Jared Martin. My address is 26 Laurel Lane.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other public comments, in-person public comments? Okay. Consent agenda. Is there a move to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Glenn. Second. I'm sorry, Laura slipped over that way. All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks. Reports and recognition. Board chairs report. This will be short. As we know, the municipal elections were this past Tuesday. Just wanted to review with everyone that our new members come on board December 1st, and we will officially welcome them at our first meeting on December 2nd. In the meantime, we are lucky that Laura and Glenn are with us this month, and we will formally recognize their service at our next meeting in November.
Uh-oh.
I've already been formally.
Well, then, a lighter touch, but we want to recognize them. Also, it's already been reported, but I wanted to recognize Wilton High School teachers Max Gabrielson and Katrina Harvey for their Excellence in Teaching Award from the University of Chicago. Both Max and Christina truly exemplify Wilton's standard of excellence in teaching. So, well-deserved award, and congratulations to both of them. Thank you. Superintendent.
Great, I have a list of updates here. So first, sticking with the theme of congratulations, we learned a couple of weeks ago from CABE that congratulations is in order for this board. You've earned CABE's Level 2 Leadership Award again. In addition, the board was recognized with several Bon E. Carney Communication Awards in the following categories. In the social media category, the board won for the Miller Driscoll live Twitter feed. In the newsletter category for the Fall 2021 Back to School Guide, and in their website category, district website was recognized. So that's great. I'll be attending the CABE CAPS conference next Friday, and will accept the leadership award on your behalf.
Thank you.
We also want to congratulate our girls soccer team, who tonight is playing in the FCIAC championship against Staples at Ward High School. It was fun to see today as they were on the bus and heading out of town. Our local police provided them an escort off campus. That was great. So let's hope they come home with a championship. We also want to congratulate our volleyball team, who made it to the quarterfinals of the FCIAC and have earned, the team has earned a seed in the CIAC championship, which begins on Monday. They had an historic game last week when they defeated the state's #1 team. So they're having a banner year, which is really exciting to see. And as we were talking about just before the meeting started, we want to congratulate our football team as well. 2 weeks ago, they beat New Canaan, first time in 25 years, and then last week at our homecoming, they defeated Ridgefield, and the first time in 27 or 28 years. So really tremendous. And just on the note about homecoming, we had Spirit Week leading into it, and then a fantastic homecoming game, and then 2 fantastic dances for our under and upperclassmen. And I don't know, my word is triumphant. It was just a fantastic week all the way around. Bob, I'm sure, can tell you much more about it. There are some pictures online floating around, but it was really just tremendous. We also want to recognize our marching band. They debuted for the first time during Spirit Week. They're performing this weekend at the U.S. Bands National Championship at MetLife Stadium. That's taking place on Saturday, so we want to wish them the best of luck. And then just kind of continuing with that theme, we also want to invite all of you and our community to attend our fall play, Peter and the Starcatcher. So performances kick off next Wednesday at 7 o'clock, and then they'll run Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday with performances at 2 and 7. You can find tickets online. It'll be performed here in the Little Theater. Tickets are limited because we're trying to social distance. So that's all very exciting. Now on to less exciting information. My kind of monthly COVID update here. The good news is we continue to see low transmission rates here in Fairfield County. I keep track, as you know, of the COVID Act Now website, and as of this afternoon, they're reporting for Fairfield County 7 new cases per 100,000 on average, and so that's the lowest it's been in a long time. The State Department of Public Health also updates every single week, and so the State Department of Public Health has recorded no cases for Wilton last week, and then an average of 5.3 cases over the preceding week. Tonight's update revealed another week with fewer than 5 cases. And so again, just confirming what we're seeing across Fairfield County, transmission rates are very low. This is not news, it shouldn't be anyway, but we learned this week that the Pfizer vaccine is now available for children ages 5 to 11. And so I imagine there are many folks here in town who will be vaccinating their kids, and that's just another step in strengthening our mitigation strategies to keep COVID at bay. Tonight, in the COVID letter that we sent out, we included an interest survey to see what number of parents might be interested in participating in a vaccine clinic if we elect to host one locally. So Maria has been in touch with the Visiting Nurse Association. They were calling the state to make sure that there would be adequate doses available. So if we get a critical mass of parents interested, we'll work with the Visiting Nurse Association to stand up a clinic locally. So we'll probably have to tap into CERT to help us manage some of the logistics, but once we get those results, I'll let the board know what our intention is in proceeding. You may have heard also this week, today in particular, the governor announced a new mitigation strategy that they're describing as Screen and Stay. And so this Screen and Stay program is modeled after the Test and Stay program, which is currently running in Massachusetts and I think one other state. I participated in the call earlier this week with representatives from the State Department of Public Health that described the Screen and Stay program. And simply put, the goal of the program, like Test and Stay, is to reduce the number of students required to quarantine as a result of an exposure. The difference between Screen and Stay and Test and Stay, in a Screen and Stay program that the state is running, if a person is exposed to a COVID positive individual and meets certain criteria, so is wearing a mask, is within a few feet, is in school, is asymptomatic, which is the most important, then that person does not need to quarantine. In lieu of quarantining for the 10 consecutive days following the exposure, if it's a student, the parent can complete a daily symptom screening checklist, submit it to the nurse, and that child can come to school. If it's an adult, the adult completes the checklist, and again, remaining asymptomatic, can stay in school and doesn't have to quarantine. So we're still waiting for the written guidance from the state as to how to roll this out. As soon as we get that, we'll put it together, and then we'll establish a start date. But right now, I don't have a start date in mind. Hopefully soon, but we're dependent on more information and guidance from the state. Okay, that's it.
So is this a recommendation from the governor, an order from the governor?
It is not required. It's
Okay.
it's an optional approach, and
So parents can stay with quarantining?
yes. So
Or-
local sounds to me like local districts would have the option to implement it,
Yeah.
and then parents, if the option's available, would have the option to participate.
Okay. So you're recommending that we go ahead?
Oh, I think so.
If and when the logistics get set up?
Yeah, and my rationale for that, we've got now a vaccine opportunity for our young kids. Our transmission rates are as low as they've probably ever been in the COVID era, and so while we're not quarantining scores of kids, we're still quarantining kids, and if we can avoid that safely and reasonably, then we should.
Okay. All right, so we'll listen for a update and a calendar for that. All right, thank you. And that was exciting, by the way. That's actually pretty
Yes,
good news.
I agree. It is. It's not like beating Ridgefield, but.
Well, that's true. All right, maybe a close second. Committee reports. Did committees meet?
We did.
All right, go for it.
Yep.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, the Ops Committee met, and our primary topic of conversation and chair of the meeting was an explanation and the details of the movement between accounts in our budget. As the year progresses, different needs arise. We have needs in one account area. We may have excess money in another account. And we went through in great detail the examples of how money's moved from one account to the next and back and forth, all with the intent to stay within budget in total, and that going forward, those movements, those adjustments will be presented to the Board of Ed for approval. And so we spent the majority of our meeting discussing those movements the whys and wherefores that happens. And it's really, it's good governance to do that, to be aware of what's happening. And the intent and the direction always is to stay within our overall total budget, which we have done. So that was the bulk of the meeting. We had a brief discussion about a topic on our agenda tonight, which is the funding for capital improvements and capital repairs.
And that'll be it.
Now, I would like to, not committee related, but to say thank you to a parent, Scott Casher, who wrote to us regarding our Genesis program and had nothing but good things to say about it, and I thank him for that, taking the time to do that. It's an important program that this board wholeheartedly supports, and I'm glad that I was part of the origination and the putting into practice that program. And I thank him for taking the time to write to us and let us know the progress and his good feelings about it. So thank you, Scott, for doing that. Okay.
Other committees? Jen?
There you go. Yeah, teaching and learning met on the 19th. We talked about, the first topic was math review, practice, and homework. Trudy was there to talk with us. We talked about the present level of homework at each school and the possibility of having parents and teachers work together to support student learning. The idea of a survey came up to survey parents to elicit thoughts on the type and amount of homework, and we already have one in place. So we'll figure out when we're giving that or sending it. Instructional time was on the list, which we had to postpone, and then we had 41 proposals. There was a wellness seminar course called DBT, which is Dialectical Behavior Therapy, and I will let Andrea and her team talk about that one day when they come. It is currently used with some of our students and has been successful. It could be offered as a semester-long or a year-long course, and it would not be open enrollment. You would be asked to be a part of it. The next one was an introduction to exercise science and sports medicine. That would be a new semester-long course offering. There were 2 math courses, Algebra 1 Geometry Accelerated and Geometry Algebra 2 Pre-Calculus Accelerated. Both are part of the math sequence change. It was just time for it to come. ASL 3, which was American Sign Language. If you guys remember, we've been adding that. This is the next course. It would be a year-long course and a continuation of 1 and 2. Black and Latino Studies. It is a year-long elective that is a state-mandated course. So we're doing it. And the last one was Marine Biology. Would be a new semester-long course offering. All had minor budget implications, curriculum development, resources and materials, professional development, except for the introduction to exercise science and sports medicine and the ASL 3. They have the potential for an additional FTE. But I think they're all going to come and talk to us at one point, just not today.
Okay. I look forward to that. Policy, yes, sorry.
It's okay. We met on the 26th.
Okay.
We discussed, you'll see 2 of the issues on Section E for review and discuss tonight. Finalize those for you all. That's the attendance of non-resident students and also retooling and our health assessments and immunization policy and regulations to match current legislative changes. We also discussed moving through, making some technical changes to some other policies to conform with other legislative changes from last year. And in the coming weeks, we will have more coming towards you.
Okay. That's all the committees, right? Just review and discuss standardized assessments and accelerated framework.
Great.
Dr. Smith?
Thank you. I'm going to introduce my colleague, Dr. Smith, here in just a second. To frame the conversation, I wanted to share some information from the State Department of Education about the 2021 standardized assessment. So here's what the folks at the State Department of Education had to say about examining any results. First, when viewing and interpreting the results for summative assessments administered in 2021, we need to take careful note of the similarities and differences. So now, among the similarities, the 2021 test used the same test blueprint, same item bank, and same test forms as prior administrations. To put it differently, the test did not change as a result of the pandemic. Among the differences, there are many. First, schools were fully remote beginning January 2020. School learning models were widely different when school reopened in August 2020. Learning models varied based on local conditions. Instructional time was reduced. Students had 177 days of instruction instead of 180. And for us locally, it's typically 181. For us here locally, Wednesdays were also shortened to provide for increased professional learning time. Instructional time was lost also because of transitions into and out of school were elongated, and then mask breaks have been implemented. Classes and individual students also had to transition between models because of COVID exposure. And in school, the environment was completely different. So even though we had in-person learning for the majority of the year, student desks were still wrapped up in sneeze guards. There was no small group instruction. Physical materials were reduced or eliminated, and we relied very heavily on our digital devices. And perhaps most importantly, there was heightened levels of stress and anxiety pervasive among parents, students, and certainly teachers. So for these reasons, the State Department of Education is strongly recommending that comparisons, whether of our own data to prior years or current data across districts, not be made. This makes a great deal of sense given the conditions and extreme variability of learning environments across schools. And in service of that belief, the state completely changed the way it produces assessment data. It broke data out by learning model, and that in and of itself made it very difficult to glean any type of comparative meaning, even if you wanted to. So I think as we're looking at this assessment data and going through all of it, in my mind anyway, what's most important today is not how our students did, but how our students are doing. We have fall map benchmark data. We're deep into the work of accelerating learning, and we're keenly focused on addressing unfinished learning. We'll have another round of benchmark data in January, which will provide us a very good indicator of how successful our plans are. Chuck?
Okay. A little bit of a coughing fit
I
here.
think I'm gonna move. Jan, do you want to move? Yeah.
So tonight I wanted to just give you a little bit of an update on our assessments. And what's going to follow from that is a little bit of an update on how central office is supporting our schools with accelerated learning. Jen kind of popped in there in the middle. And then each of our principals are going to give you an update on their action plan. Okay. So the beginning part of this, I kind of wanted to finish up what is our traditional testing report. When we met back in August, I shared with you some preliminary information that we had, but the point of that workshop was really to give you a sense of what the unfinished learning was. And we also wanted to talk a great deal about the accelerated learning framework. So tonight I kind of want to finish up what is our traditional testing report. I'm going to go over the SBA achievement distribution by grade level. I'm going to talk to you about the official Connecticut SAT, and I'll explain that when we get to it. The ACT, advanced placement, college persistence, and then I'm going to share with you some more recent data from our fall NWEA math assessment. Next slide. So before I get into the distribution of the SBA scores, I just wanted to remind everybody there are 4 levels of achievement on the SBA. In order for students to be considered to have met grade level standards, they have to be at either a 3 or a 4. So the percentages that you see in the following slides are going to be children who achieved either a 3 or a 4. Okay, next slide. So I have a lot of these slides. I'm not going to go through each one. I have shared with you the passing column in 2021. I did that in our August workshop. But for instance, right here, 67.4 achieved a 3 or a 4 in 3rd grade last year. What you see there is the distribution across the 4 levels. And what you're going to see is a pattern that repeats itself pretty much through the following grade levels. And that is that basically you're going to see a downward trend to the left. So less students achieving 4, less students achieving 3, more students achieving in 2. That's where we see the biggest increase, and some increases in level 1. We've talked to you a lot about what the nature of unfinished learning is. It's not that learning didn't occur. What we're seeing with students who are at that level 2 is that a lot of the learning did not stick. It's not secure. And you'll understand that more as we explain some of the things in the following slides. They need more practice, they need more review. Their learning is wobbly, kind of, it's not secure. Next slide. And again, you'll see the same trend. Next slide. And again, that very large increase in level 2 kids in 5th grade ELA. Next slide. Now here is a little bit different. There was a decrease in level 4, an increase in level 5, but still an increase in level 2. Next one. Again, the same sort of trend. And in 8th grade. Next. Little bit of an anomaly here, an increase in level 4.
And 5. And 4, yeah.
All right, so now we're going to move on to math. Now, the trend is a little bit more pronounced in the area of math. Next slide. Quite a dramatic decrease in level 4s. A slight decrease in level 3, but a big increase in level 2. Next one. So again, a little bit of an uptick in 5th grade in level 2. Next one. Pretty significant decrease in level 4s, level 3 maintained, but a pretty significant increase in level 2. Next one. And then the last one. So 8th grade was a bit of a bright spot that year, which is unusual because if you can see from the history, 8th grade has not traditionally been a bright spot. Any questions about the distribution?
I guess my question would be, do we know or do we have any ability to know how other districts did?
Yeah.
I think Kevin just addressed that issue.
Yeah, and so the way the state published information,
Right.
they broke it down into several categories. And so they organized it by in-person learning, remote learning, and hybrid learning based on the proportion of the year that kids were in that model. So that information the state did put out, and you can sort your way through it and put
By
it together.
district, right?
You can see it by district,
Okay.
yeah.
So how do we compare then with a New Canaan, a Darien, okay, a Westport, and this?
Well, I think the point that the state has been trying to make, and I think Kevin articulated this well, is that comparisons would probably not be appropriate given the differences in the learning models across districts.
Because you can't aggregate up. It's hard to make meaning out of it because of the extreme variability. In any other year, you could say these are mostly apples to apples.
Why would they not be apples to apples? I mean, they were all operating under the same conditions we were operating.
No, they weren't
No,
though.
they-
So some
yeah.
districts ran, so for example, Darien and New Canaan, they had their in-person model for the majority of the year for these tested grades. We were in a hybrid situation. So Ridgefield was, I think, in-person for some of their elementary grades, but hybrid for most of the year in their middle grades. So the conditions aren't the same.
Right, okay.
And then you had other places that were remote learning for a good chunk of the year. Fortunately, that wasn't us. So, I think the point is, you don't know how to make sense of it. You don't know what it means.
Right.
And that's really, and I think, as the more I've thought about it, I don't know what it means. And so it's hard to make any meaningful statement about it. And so I think, personally, I've concluded that we know that we have unfinished learning. That's what this entire year is focused on. We see it in the data. And, so we're just trying to pick up and move forward.
Okay.
But going forward, like, everyone's in person this year in the DRG, right?
Yeah,
So next year, we can go back to.
Exactly. You'd be, we'd kind of be in a place where we were in 2019 before the pandemic, where you can reasonably assume learning models are about the same, instructional time is about the same, and so I think you can look across a DIRG or look across schools and make some reasonable comparisons.
Okay. And clearly, there's some red flags to go up here as you look at this data.
Is it fair to say that the younger kids were more impacted?
Yes.
And the older, everyone was suppressed, everyone.
Everybody.
With a couple of kind
Yeah.
of weird exceptions.
Our younger students,
But
the
the
3 to 5.
younger ones seem to be
Yes.
the most suppressed and the most
Yes.
wobbly, or whatever the word was you
Yes.
used.
Insecure in their learning, yes.
Sorry, insecure.
That's okay.
Yeah,
I did use the term wobbly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Okay.
that repeats the trend nationally. The 3 to 5 age group was the most impacted, and math was impacted more than ELA. And we see the same exact trends here.
Okay.
Okay. And I know we're, just because I see all the principals and the curriculum people, I know we're going to talk about like how we're going to do that heavy lift.
How we're doing it. Yes.
Okay, all right, okay. Because
Yeah.
these are disturbing numbers.
Yes,
And
but I
and
think
I know that, so I'm just trying to get a sense of, what the engine is that's going to make the difference.
I think you'll see that in subsequent slides, because these numbers themselves don't tell us a lot. The
Mhm.
map tells us a lot more, and so we're going to show that to you later
The
on.
map?
The map,
Map,
Map.
okay.
MAP.
Got it, okay.
Okay.
Can I ask a quick question before
Sure.
we go on? To Glenn's point, and taking all your considerations, are we in the middle of our DIRG based on these scores? I'm sure you guys have looked, so do you guys know
Yeah,
where
I
we are?
think, so at a high level, I would say across the elementary and the middle school, we're on the low side. At the high school with SAT, we're on the high side.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Which is-
my opinion, it means absolutely nothing.
Exactly, right. But people are going to ask us.
Yes.
Right, but the whole point to that is, well, we were in a hybrid, we were here, we were there,
Right.
whatever. But people are going to ask, so.
And our numbers are what's going to give us the marching orders to go forward. Like, regardless of where we are comparatively.
Correct.
It is our numbers that and then ultimately the learning of our individual students that we need to work on and fix.
Yeah.
Right. I think Glenn is asking, and why I'm following up is only because our town likes to
Oh, yeah.
compare us all the time to everybody else. So the question's going to come.
Well, I just have a, random, but like if the emotional, social piece of it had such an impact, will we, in a couple of years looking back to the pandemic, decide that the in-person learning was the best for the kids on that level? And no one has to say it now, because I'm sure we need the time to digest everything and move forward with that, but just, we should at some point put a stake in it or whatever, and stake in the ground. And so if this ever happens again, what do we learn from it, or what could be done to make hybrid not so difficult?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think based on the state data, what you see across the state, and probably a national trend as well, is that kids who participated in school in person, at least from an achievement perspective, tended to do better than kids who were hybrid, or certainly kids who were fully remote. And that pattern does persist. That was one of the observations the State Department of Ed made. And I think that your question about where kids are socially and emotionally is a great one, because those are obviously strongly connected to achievement.
Yeah. I know no one had a crystal ball, so not criticizing anyone, just. but we don't want to forget all the things that we're learning right
Absolutely.
now.
I absolutely agree that that is one of the things that we learned in my own unscientific look at the data.
Yeah.
It seems to me that districts that had a longer in-person time
Mhm.
fared better.
And that's to be expected.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, next slide. So these are the official results of the 21 Connecticut SAT. You may remember when I reported the unofficial results, we were at 92.5 for ELA and 69.9 for math. So as we gain data, students report their data. It just takes the state a while for us to get the official numbers. So we're now at 94.6 and 72.1, which is a slight increase for both of those. Next slide. So this is just our performance across time. Interestingly, in ELA, or EBRW, we are, I think, the second highest in the past 5 years. And although math is the lowest over the past 5 years, it's not significantly lower than certain years.
Does that hold true for all districts that ELA is much higher than math?
Yeah.
So everybody struggles with math.
Yes, it might be a measurement issue.
Yeah, the ELA, the benchmark for the evidence-based reading and writing is actually a lower number than the benchmark for math.
And that's because it's
That-
predictive of grades in college.
in college.
You're scoring a B- or better on a freshman credit-bearing course.
Yeah.
So it's harder to get a B- in a math class
In
in freshman year
college.
of college, I guess.
But if we were to look across different districts, their numbers would be reflected the same way.
Yes.
You know. Okay.
So this goes, I guess this is showing my earlier point too, that the high school kids, again, depressed, well, not in ELA, but depressed somewhat, but not to the extent that the
The
little
young
ones
ones
were.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's a bit of good news there
Yes,
for the SAT.
I think it's very good news.
Yeah.
Okay, next slide. So in terms of the advanced placement, we had 309 test takers, and they took a total of 631 tests. 519, which is 82.2%, scored a 3, 4, or 5. You have to keep in mind that not everybody who takes the course takes the test. And we had a lower participation rate than in prior years. It's actually 631 is the lowest in the past 6 years.
Has that been a steady trend declining downwards? I'm just
Steady.
curious if AP uptake has kind of declined a bit as colleges over time seem to not be as responsive.
Yes. Bob, I think you could, isn't
Yeah,
participation?
that is true. So we've analyzed those data trends, and it has ticked downward. Couple things going on. There are some colleges we know that that's not an important test for them. The other thing is, some things have changed with registration where you have to register early, and I think that's impacted some students. You know, the registration now is actually early in the year. But I've been analyzing that, and you know, I've had students come to me and say, you know, and then you have the college acceptance where they go ED and they're already in. I've had a number of students come to me, some of our best students, saying, I'm already into whichever college, and you know, taking the test is not of further interest to me. We of course say, you're taking the course. We would expect you to take the test, but not everybody does.
And it's expensive.
Yeah.
But the number of kids enrolled in the AP courses, is that roughly about the same? And the test taker, the percentage of kids taking the test has gone down?
I think that we're still very solid in AP. One of the trends that we're seeing, we're introducing more ECE courses, early college experience, and to the district's credit, students have a choice in 2 really rigorous
Oh, yeah,
programs, so
yeah.
that's impacting, I think, the numbers some.
Yeah, and that's, I know there's a slide coming up, because I read ahead a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think that's impressive, so, okay.
Next slide. So this is the distribution, subjects tested and the scores across them. The top 5 courses by participation were AP US History, Computer Science, US Government, Environmental Science, and Spanish Language and Culture. All had greater than 50 test takers, and AP US History had 72. Next slide. So this is the percent of students scoring 3 or greater. Last year was a tough year.
It was a tough year nationally, though,
Yes.
so some tests were significantly lower nationally, particularly ones that were content-heavy. Schools in hybrid models or disrupted learning just didn't get through the content.
I think nationally, the average was a 6% lower percentage of kids. Okay, next slide. So this tells you the number of our seniors who have taken at least one AP or ECE course. You see, it's usually in the sense of 3 out of 4 of our kids take an AP course
Yeah.
sometime during their high school career, which I think is impressive.
I think it's really impressive and it's really important to remember that. And the ECE, is that the UConn
Yes.
Associated College Credit?
Right.
Okay.
And the last column just shows you that of those 205 students, the average of them take 4 or more of those courses. So they're really
Yeah.
taking a heavy course load of rigorous courses.
That's true.
Okay, next slide. These are our ACT scores. They've been pretty steady across past 5 years. You will notice that less students, significantly less number of students have participated in the ACT. Little bit of an uptick from 2020, but the overall trend has been less students taking this test. But our performance has pretty much remained the same.
Do you just, this is probably not time to ask the question, but a sense of the number of colleges and universities that have de-emphasized the SAT, and then along with that, I assume the ACT?
Yeah, I think we
Is
could
that
get that information.
huge or little, or?
Christine Collins might be-
I can get that information from Christine.
Okay, yeah, I'm
My
sorry.
impression is there has been a trend among colleges to not follow this.
Okay, all
I
right.
have a senior in high school, and almost all of, she's applying to engineering programs, and almost all of the state schools, it's test optional.
Okay, okay, yeah. Maybe we can hear more about that later. Yeah, all right. Sorry, didn't mean to sidetrack you.
No, it's an interesting topic. The next slide. This, I think, is a wonderful slide. This is comparing the college persistence of our students compared to our DERG counterparts in terms of entrance and persistence. We've been number 1 in the DERG for persistence 6 of the last 7 years, number 2 in the DERG for the other.
Yeah.
So we are well preparing our students to be successful in college.
It's a good one. It's really good.
What's the data source?
It's actually on Ed's site, so it's public data.
Oh, it's not the college
That's where they
clearinghouse?
get it from. They get
It is
from
the college
they get it from the clearinghouse, but
Okay.
the state aggregates it by district and
Okay.
publishes it.
Okay? All right, next slide. All right, now I really want to share with you, or we are going to share with you, our most recent administration of the NWEA math growth test. In the following slides, what you're going to see are the number of students below benchmark, and we divided them into 3 categories: all students, students with high needs, and students in intervention. What we're going to try to show to you here is who are those students that are in need of a little bit of, so I talked about that ballooning of students in the level 2. We're going to show this to you in more detail, and then we're going to transition to Trudy and Karen talking a little bit about what instructionally we're doing, what supports we at central office are providing to the schools to address that group of students. Okay? So I'm going to turn this over to Matthew because these charts can be a little bit confusing to interpret. Next slide.
Okay, so at the top of each slide, you'll see the data from last year. And so you'll see where we started the year in the fall, how many students were below benchmark. The columns on the right give you the number of students who we had in intervention, the number of students who are the high needs group, that is special education primarily, English language learners, and people who are eligible for free and reduced lunch. The bulk of these students, nearly all of them, receive direct services from us. We are already intervening with talented individuals, providing them services. The bulk of the all student that are below benchmark are the ones that need to be addressed in the classroom. And so what you're going to see is the total population here changed by 30 students. So a lot of students who did not attend our kindergarten are now either returning from being homeschooled or have come here from somewhere else. So we have an uptick in the number of students overall, but you'll notice that our intervention students are performing about the same rate, and our high needs students actually performed a little bit better in ELA. But you'll see that here's the uptick, and this is the unfinished learning. Now, some of this could be in grades 1 and 2 from influx of new students, and some of it could just be those foundational skills not fully sticking. You'll notice as we go on through the grades that this gap is going to be a bit smaller. You'll see that in some of the grades, this number really approaches where we were in the fall. So we're sort of back to where we were at the beginning of last year, which is okay because in many cases, this number is either in between where we were last year or better. So it's actually good news. That means we didn't have as big of a summer slide as we could have. You'll also notice that often, and here is not the case, the math number is a bit larger, also to be expected. Do you want to go to second grade? So same story here, another uptick in the population and an uptick in students with some unfinished learning. High needs have a few more below benchmark. And intervention, you would expect also a lot of students because that's why they're in intervention, because they're below benchmark. Next slide. Here is an uptick here. So instead of kind of falling where we were, but keep in mind that we added students, we added another 20 students, and these students are in a new school, and they're taking a more rigorous test. The NWEA test that they take in third grade, the students have to read the items rather than having the items read to them. So again, you have 44 students who are providing direct services. Subtract that from the 85, and that's the lift that we need to make, in addition to the supports they're already getting from individuals. Another wondering we're having about this number in third grade for math, that maybe they're not used to reading math items, that some of the reading challenges are bleeding over and exacerbating a little bit of the math challenges. Trudy and Karen will talk a little bit more about this. We shared all of this data with the building administration, including exactly which students were below benchmark in which classes. So when you see what the planning and the detail that Trudy and Karen put into this, the teachers know who needs to be moved up above benchmark, and they also have a plan.
Matthew, if Karen could just talk for a minute about this particular cohort.
It's also important to remember that our third graders, when we closed in March of 2020, they were in first grade and at a very critical juncture in their literacy development. Just for perspective, they were learning vowel teams for the first time, and that's where their learning was interrupted. So we get a lot of learning that didn't stick solidly, and that is quite wobbly and under-practiced moving forward, that's impacting our reading achievement here.
This is a cohort that we're concerned about. But Karen, I think, has done a really nice job supporting the third grade team in identifying what it is that, who needs support and what they need support. They didn't solidify those foundational skills that normally would have been solidified in first grade. And of course, last year was not an ideal situation either. So this particular cohort requires some focused attention from us.
So with the first graders, was there any, like how about the kindergartners? They were just didn't have as great an impact as the first graders did?
First grade they grow so much in their reading development in the first grade year. It's just a very critical year.
Okay.
It's an unfortunate time.
Yeah,
Someone
no,
had to be
yeah.
interrupted then. It's unfortunate.
Move on. So grade 4, back to one of those things where a smaller lift in terms of the amount of kids in the regular classroom when you compare it to the amount we're already providing services to. Back to kind of fall of last year, and ELA maybe somewhere in the middle. So again, maybe some evidence that there's traction towards the end of last year. We'll go to grade 5. So grade 5 ELA, we're kind of where we left off in the spring, so that's a little bit of a heavier lift. So there's some more unfinished learning for this cohort of students. And similar in math. So this is a group that's really going to be working to finish a pretty large group of kids with some unfinished learning from 4th grade. You want to go to middle school now? As you'll see when we go through the middle school, the picture starts looking better. The numbers and the percentages are smaller in terms of students who have unfinished learning. We also include the AIM students in people that we provide some additional support to, because that's an additional support where they're getting actual direct instruction.
I'm sorry, so are they included in the intervention?
Yes.
column? Okay.
Yeah. They're just included in the count, so
Okay.
because we consider that an intervention. And grade 7, you can see that in ELA, we're kind of back to where we were in the fall. Intervention students doing well. So they, again, there's an opportunity always in our intervention program to exit students and enter new students. And math is about where we were at the beginning of the year last year. And we have slight uptick. There's 323 students, a few more students entering 7th grade than where we were last year at the end of the year. And then 8th grade. And again, you'll see the numbers have been going down. And 8th grade is actually starting off better than they were, so that's really kudos to the 7th grade teams last year, both in math and reading. So real nice work last year of catching kids up, and we're going to continue that work. I'm going to be kind of transitioning over. So what we did with this information is we shared it with the administration and detail about the different strands and which strands were most impacted by the unfinished learning. Trudy and Karen are going to talk about pretty specifically. They'll give you some examples of the work that they did to support teachers to complete that unfinished learning.
Matthew, can I ask you a question first?
Sure.
In the grades where it's relevant, did you guys track the students that were at a level 4 and are now at a level 3?
Yes, each teacher has that information in the class report will tell.
Okay. So we're doing whatever you guys are doing on the intervention end for this end, we're also doing for the other end?
That is primarily the responsibility of the general ed teacher. We don't have intervention for students at the upper end.
As long as they've been identified and we're doing something.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, and maybe at some point we can share this with you, I haven't looked at it recently, but historically, that's the group that we grow most. So when I look at that data, the kids at the higher end are the kids who show the most growth historically. So I just wanted to make a comment. So Debbie, I think some of this data just reinforced what you were talking about who has been impacted the most by unfinished learning. You know, as we go up through the grades, we're seeing less and less students with unfinished learning. What Matthew shared with you was how we went about identifying the who needs this. Now I want Trudy and Karen to talk to you about what they need to learn.
What we did, we created a tool that basically supports the buildings in their work with students. And we connected the information that NWEA MAP provides about what groups of students are ready to learn with specific units of instruction in ELA and MAP. And that process involved using the MAP data to identify the groups of students at each grade level who are near benchmark or just below. We were identifying students by class, and we shared that information with buildings and with teachers. And we used the MAP data to target learning by unit of instruction, and we recommended specific strategies for addressing the learning needs of this group of students, assessing the impact of what we're doing on student learning specifically.
So I'm going to walk you through a couple of examples here on the third grade plan. So one of the features of the NWEA MAP assessment system is that it gives us a continuum of where students are in their learning. This helps us to think about the groups of students across grade levels and what the high leverage learning will be for them within particular units. So this chart illustrates this thinking. If you look in the all the way on the far left column, you'll see the third grade unit in the top row that our third graders are currently in, and the unit that they will be in from December to January. So they take the MAP again in January. We've identified the next 2 units. In the column to the right of that is a RIT band. So a RIT score with NWEA it helps us to compare achievement over time. And what NWEA does is they put in a band students who have similar learning needs. So the kids who are ready to learn the same thing are grouped together. That number, that band, gives us the who we need. Those are the students who are approaching the benchmark. In the column to the right of that is the what. The continuum that NWEA has built shows us 3 levels of learning that students may present in. The bottom, I'm going to start at the bottom, the ready to learn. The ready to learn that I have filtered through there is the whole class instruction that's fueled by our curriculum. Our curriculum is the best fuel, I'll use the word again, to promote kids toward grade level expectations. So that's just whole class instruction that everyone's getting at grade level, has not changed. Just above that then, some of the students in this band, that I've identified the skill there that some will need to practice because they're going to need a high degree, they're going to need that learning in their bones. They're going to need a high degree of automaticity to be successful in the grade level learning. And then just above that is the skill that will need to be retaught if it's insecure, if it's still wobbly, and that will most likely happen in small group instruction. I want to emphasize that the teachers are in the best position to determine who requires more practice. They're in the best position to monitor that practice, to make sure that it's practice doesn't make perfect. Imperfect practice does not get us where we need to be. The teacher's in the best place to say, okay, that practice isn't sticking, I'm going to reteach, and we're going to step back a level. To the right of the what is the where and how. So as I've already said, the ready to learn is in the whole class instruction. Practice, they may see practice in partnerships. They'll definitely see practice in authentic literature and in conferring with their teachers. Reteaching, though, will happen more in small group instruction. And then finally, in the far right column, I've identified tools that we already have, that we already use in our grade level instruction for monitoring the progress of our learners. We use learning progressions, which will identify what summary looks like, for example, when it's done like a second grader, when it's done like a third grader, when it's done like a fourth grader. A few years ago, I brought you some student samples, and we looked at how those grew over time. What the progressions help kids do is they help just kind of monitor themselves and say, am I doing this work like a third grader? It helps a teacher to see what the student is doing well, and then what the student needs to move toward grade level standards. So that is how the tool works for our teachers. It identifies the who, it identifies the what, the where and how we will know if the learning is sticking.
Can you just scroll down a little bit? We ended up putting them on the same grade levels in the same document. Math followed exactly the same process. We identified the students who were in that approaching benchmark band, and then we joined that with the next 2 units of study across all the grade levels. This just happens to show third grade. Same RIT band applies, 181 to 190. And what you notice here is there aren't as many skills that appear in the reteach column in the learning continuum. That is consistent, and it affirms some of the data that we saw in the previous slides, that we have large groups of students who benefit from targeted practice to reinforce and solidify their learning. The tools that we use in math are a little bit different. We have opportunities for targeted practice built into our curriculum units, and all the teachers have access to that. We have at the third grade, we have something called Map Accelerator, which provides students with opportunities to practice in Khan Academy based on their MAP scores in each of the different categories of learning that are tested in math. In addition, the progress monitoring that teachers can engage with include those targeted practice opportunities built into the units. This happens to be a unit that introduces multiplication, so you see reference to a lot of tools that are used to check in with and build fact fluency as students begin to learn multiplication. Just so you know, we split our multiplication in third grade. Part 1, we do the foundation facts, which are times 2, times 1, times 5, times 10, times 0. They're called foundation facts because they're used to learn other facts. So that we have a geometry unit, and then we revisit the multiplication facts after that. So this is all organized in the same way. These plans, these templates, will take us up through the next map administration, which is in January. And I guess we want to take a quick look at 8th grade too. Just so you
Back to the slide. The 8th grade plan follows the exact format of the example that I showed you in 3rd grade. The main difference being that our learning progressions are nice and solid and standards aligned for grades 2 through grade 6. So the work of 7th and 8th grade, they're currently working with their instructional coach to thread that standards aligned progression up through 7th and 8th grade to monitor progress. And they've been engaged in that work from October 12th forward, and it's really starting to come together.
You can just show the 8th grade. Again, it's a similar approach. 8th grade is in the middle of kind of the the connection between geometry that transitions into algebra. So you see reference to geometry and other standards in this unit. Practice items are identified. The tools that teachers have at their disposal are the targeted practice that's built into the curriculum and iExcel, which is also linked to specific standards in the curriculum. Tools that teachers have to review and monitor student progress include the practice problems in the workbook, exit slips, which we call cool downs in 8th grade. And teachers can also monitor, there's also, depending on which grade level, the teams engage in weekly embedded review, and the teachers have been building those embedded review exercises based on the learning that students need to solidify. So it's been a very kind of coordinated practice.
So this was our way of showing you that we know who needs to work on what, and we've given a lot of support to the buildings in terms of making those decisions. This has required a lot of work and a lot of planning. We want our teachers to devote their time to actually teaching the kids. So I just want to thank this group over here for doing some of that heavy lifting for the teachers, particularly around this group of kids. The teachers do have the ability to do this for all groups of kids. We just kind of assume that responsibility for this group that has ballooned. And I think it gives teachers just very specific guidance as to what they should be doing with kids. Now this, I'm hoping you're picking up on the fact that we've only done this for the upcoming units. In January, when we get new data, we have to redo all of this work all over again. And we're hoping that our winter map will show the progress from the fall map, and then give us the information we need to get to the goal that we have of getting more kids to grade level.
Have you had any feedback from teachers in terms of the usability of the data or the friendliness of the data, and then how the students are responding to the reteach and the practice
They're
teach?
feeling a sense of urgency right now. They have a lot of information at their fingertips, from pre-unit assessments, post-unit assessments, in 3rd through 8th grade in the next month window or so. We're also engaging in some interim benchmark assessments that are very targeted and mirror the ESPA in the item types. So we're hopeful and we're monitoring very closely.
When did you guys roll this out with the teachers? So you guys created this, when did it actually get to them?
Professional Learning Day on Tuesday.
Tuesday, like?
Tuesday.
Yes.
They've been using a lot of the tools already.
Yes.
The formative assessment, the benchmark assessments, the data notebooks, and a lot of the work that you're going to see the principals present has been in place since nearly the beginning of the school year.
And it's important to remember that that document just summarizes a process that teachers have known how to do since we had MAP. We did bring an NWEA representative in September 22nd, right when the MAP data was fresh, and taught teachers how to go through this for all students. This is just for the students who are very close up to approaching benchmark.
Okay.
And I think another thing, they've said it, but it's worth restating, the bulk of those kids just had unfinished learning. When you compare them to the standards in the NWEA at the test level, they were ready for grade level work. It wasn't like they were, that group that we're targeting is real close. And so additional practice and maybe some small group instruction should make some good gains for us.
I'm asking for 2 reasons. November is a tough month. There's a lot of half days, there's a lot of days off. Kids start to lose their focus. And then we hit December. We've got a lot of time off. So I'm trying to be fair to you guys also, like how much time do they really have to make this progress? So I'm happy to hear that our teachers have already kind of been doing this for the past couple months. And this is just kind of like the little
It's
extra
just kind of
push.
what's a point on
It is
it.
interesting, though, research, and research is research, but most learning occurs between November and March. That's when the prime learning time is for kids in school. Research has shown that over and over again. So I think this is very timely. The teachers now can really, the beginning of the school, a lot of it is review, right? A lot of it's getting settled, setting up routines. And the end of the year is the end of the year, right? Between end-year assessments, end-of-year activities. So I'm really feeling like this opportunity between November and March is the most important for us.
Okay.
Are we ready to transition to the principals?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you'll see when, beginning with Kathy, to your question about when it began, she'll show you, some kind of building level artifacts that really highlight they hit the ground running in August.
Okay, great. Well, good evening, everyone. I want to start with a little celebration. Last Friday, we did get to have some Halloween parades. So, a celebration of Miller Driscoll and another little sign that we're eking back towards normal, I would say. I also, before I get started, want to thank my teachers and my staff because we are asking them to do all of the things that they did before COVID while we are still in the midst of COVID. So it's a lot, and they're taking it all on, but they're doing an amazing job. And like Chuck said, we've been doing this map data analysis for a long time, probably, for the 5 years that I've been here. The teachers dig into the progressions and look at, what they target for the kids. So I'm going to kind of I'm going to give you a little quick update on a few things on my SIP and then talk about how we had our teachers do goal setting this year and how that leads into classroom data analysis and planning for small group instruction. So you can switch it up, Lori. All right, so this is just a little quick summary. Thanks to Janine Carley and all of our PD planning, we did introduce the accelerated framework, and all of the teachers did connected to the work they had done before COVID into those 5 buckets of the accelerated learning framework. We do have schedules created that include 2 45-minute IETs per week. And the team leaders and our instructional coaches are doing a wonderful job planning the agendas so that they can use that time to plan responsibly. We resumed our student-centered coaching, and based on our intervention data over the past 5 years, we, meaning I, said we would do K-2 classroom teachers would do coaching cycles within the first trimester on phonics and phonemic awareness, because that's the area where most of our students are identified for intervention. And so you can see updated on there where the teams are in those coaching cycles. And again, the coaches are sharing some great data with us. Kindergarten has 3 IETs this year. First grade has 3 IETs, so that's going a little bit slower. Second grade has 2 IETs, so half of them have already finished that coaching cycle. And 100% of our classroom teachers have completed the observable checklist, and our specialists, special education, and related service people are completing that checklist for targeted students, and all of them are using it, or I should say used it, because we're done with goal setting now with all of our certified staff, used it in their goal setting. Now you can switch. Okay, and now here's where I'm going to just kind of geek out for a minute, because thanks to Matthew, we call these lovely people at central office and say, here's what we want to do with our teachers, can you help us? So thanks to Matthew, he helped us compile data for our teachers over the last 5 years, for those teachers who have been here for the last 5 years, which is, how long I've been here. And so I just want to share with you some of the data that we asked teachers to look at. And these are just, again, samples. So if you look on the top left, this is longitudinal data that shows growth by teacher. So we gave this to teachers so that they could look at, okay, what is our, oh my gosh, why did I forget it? Conditional growth percentile across years to be able to look at how am I growing kids in reading and how am I growing kids in math. So if you take a look at this teacher in particular, this teacher is very good. Across both grade level, both subject areas, but particularly good at growing kids in math. The top right is a quadrant chart that we get from NWEA based on our MAP scores. And again, plots kids in different quadrants based on their achievement and their growth. The top right is where we want all of the kids to be, which is high achievement, high growth. But the nice part is teachers have access to this information, and if you click on just one of those little dots or pluses, it will tell you exactly who that student is and where they scored and where they've scored in the past. So we asked teachers to look at this prior to their goal setting, along with then some detailed strand data based on the map to say, okay, if I'm going to set goals for myself as a teacher to get better as a teacher, how will I use this longitudinal data to inform where I would like to do some additional work? So this teacher in particular decided to focus on reading. And again, looked at classroom data for this year on the map, and actually looked at the strand around literature and informational text to say, gee, you know what, I'm going to work on that comprehension strand. And then the goal setting process went through deciding what that teacher wanted to do professional learning wise in regards to peer collaboration, and then how that teacher would incorporate those things with his students. So that's sort of like the first steps of going like big data down to a little bit smaller. So go ahead, Lori, and I'll make sure I said everything I was supposed to say. And then thanks to Karen Brennicky, who we also called over the summer, and I was like, listen, I think we should make this data workbook thing, and I think it should have all this stuff in it, and it should have tabs, and we should all be able to see it, and teachers will have all their information in one place, and then when Matthew needs information, then he could just pull it from there, and like, what do you think? And she was like, okay. And so off she went with Matthew, and she made these data workbooks for all of the teachers at my school and at Cider Mill. And so I just wanted to show you a little bit of some of the data that we look at and how we analyze it. Over to the left on the bottom, the big chart that's super colorful, that's a lot of our Heggerty data. And so as you can see, as teachers look across a whole classroom set of data, if you look at that kind of middle column, then a teacher would look at that and say, well, gee, look at that. My kids are having trouble with segmenting. So I might plan a whole group instruction around segmenting. Where I might look at some of those other columns where, again, there's a lot of green and maybe a little bit of red and a little bit of yellow, and decide, should I have a small group? Should I do maybe some comparing with one student? But they really are looking at classroom data to then be able to plan small groups and to also be able to analyze how students are moving over time. That top little chart that says trimester one, that's where we record our TC running record data. And again, we're letting teachers know that this is data that is continuous, whereas before we would report it at one time. We want teachers to be continually monitoring the kids and making sure they're moving, which then helps us to look and make sure kids are moving as well. On the right where it says snap words, that's just a little sample of a teacher who decided to put some more data into his data workbook and use that again for planning small group instruction. And on the bottom right, that's just a little sample of a snippet of a teacher's small group instruction. I blacked out the names. But just so you can see how they take all of this now, classroom data, and use it to target specific students. Making sense? Hope so. Guess what? There's more charts. Don't worry. Hit it, Lori. I know. It's so fun, isn't it? Okay. Then, this is our informal intervention data, all right? So thanks to COVID, some COVID grant money, and work with the Dr. Smiths, we were able to hire some informal interventionists. And what we decided to do with those people was to target a process that we use in kindergarten with our current staff, but to kind of intervene early and often. So what we did was we took data from the data workbooks, and we met with grade level teams in our intervention, during our intervention time, to say who might be students who need some informal intervention. So they aren't officially formally going into the SRBI process, but instead they get informal intervention 2 or 3 times per week with these additional interventionists that we hired. then what happens is, on a 3-week cycle, we are coming back and looking at how are those students doing? Should they stay in informal intervention? Should they exit informal intervention and just go back to class? They don't need anything else. Or should they move on to a formal intervention? So this, again, is just a small snippet, very small, of some data that the informal interventionists collected. They're also tracking as well how many times they're seeing the students, so we can go back and say, well, gee, if Matthew didn't make that as much progress as we expected, well, maybe he was absent a couple days, or maybe we didn't see him quite as often, and we can look at all those different factors. So that is encouraging, and it's very nice, again, and the parents, we of course contact the parents, but all of the parents of the students who have gone into informal have been very excited that it's happened so very quickly.
So this is already up and going?
Oh, yeah, third week of school, we had the groups started. You can see it, well, no, you probably can't see because it's so tiny, but see that 10-1 where they started to take kids over to the right? So, it's very exciting. And then, good, Lori, last slide, promise. And then this is just some intervention data right now. So these are the number of students. So we have 45 students in kindergarten, informally, working on rhyming. That's an important skill in kindergarten. But you can take a look at the numbers, both informal and then also informal intervention. So we're on it. We know where our kids are. And like I said, kudos to the teachers. They are, doing amazing things, and they're very happy to be able to take small groups again.
So any questions for Catherine?
I have a professional development question. Not really, kind of related, not really related, but you mentioned something about it. Are your teachers allowed to individually receive professional development on a topic that they want to, or are we only doing group instruction?
No, they have opportunities to do that. So
Okay.
through our teacher evaluation process, teachers develop what's known as a personalized professional learning plan. They do try to take advantage through that plan of many of the things that we offer, but it's a choice. They also have the opportunity to do things on their own as well.
Okay. So you mentioned teacher goals, right? And then
Yes.
following along.
Yes.
Okay.
I will say the other piece that we are doing is after the teachers finish their goal setting, then what we did Tuesday, meaning 2 days ago, was we really did differentiate our professional learning and gave people choices and targeted using our coaches and other experts in the building to say, if you decided your goal is in the area of math, then here's a session for you on responsive lesson planning in math. If you decided your goal was in reading comprehension, here's a session for you. If you decided your goal was in reading foundational skills, here's a session for you. So we really are trying to honor the fact that they put a lot of time into this goal setting based on all of this data. We're trying to then say, okay, we're gonna, tweak what we're doing to make sure that we're meeting your needs. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
We've also engaged the Connecticut Center for School Change, who are developing a series of webinars around accelerated learning, which we will make available to staff. Learn those 5 components,
Mhm.
and teachers can pick and choose which of those that they feel they want to. Trying to personalize it as much as possible.
Which I love. Thanks.
So I think Jen is going to participate remotely.
Yeah, she's online, and just to check in with her. I don't know what the speakers are on here.
Can you turn the speakers up?
Yeah, we got to turn the speakers up. Yep. Jen, just hang on. We're trying to just get the volume up in the room here.
Okay, no problem.
There you go. All right, speakers are muddy. So, hey, Jen, the speakers are a little muddy, so I'm just going to ask you to use your playground voice.
Okay. All right.
And then Lori's got the slide, so just, cue her to advance it.
Okay. So I'm hoping you guys can hear me. I'll be happy to answer any questions or meet with anybody afterwards if anyone has any questions. So, like Kathy, I want to first thank our staff. They have been unbelievable and working so diligently every day to meet the needs of each of our different learners wherever they are, and to really accelerate the learning and catch kids up from the crazy year that we've all had. So I just want to really thank them and tell them how much we appreciate them. So go ahead, Lori, you can just stand. So this is a visual for the strategic planning process that we all take. Basically, we set our district goals. Then we look at Site or Mail, we create our strategic improvement plan, we use the SBAC data and the MAP data. From there, it's really important for Kathy to talk to it where our teachers set individual goals based on their MAP data. Then we have lots of IEPs, and we look at lots of data, which you're going to see. And then, obviously, along with that, we have a lot of our adult actions that make all of this happen, make the magic happen. Lori? So with the next two slides, you're going to see this is an update of what we're doing. We have had a very, very busy fall. All of our staff has been introduced to the Accelerated Learning Framework. We've really refined systematically our IET structures and just really kind of improved upon those processes. We've also been using the data workbook that Karen created. We have been reviewing all of our fall MAP data at various levels and various meetings. And we've looked very closely at who needs intervention and who needs additional instruction. Corey? One of the things that we've used for many of our school improvement initiatives has been the IEPs, just their effectiveness. And all of our IEPs have been meeting very systematically around specific data sets and to conduct responsive lesson planning. We've also been very focused recently on our students approaching benchmark. There's an understanding that students at the different levels, whether it's red and orange, or yellow, or green and blue, there's different types of support that they need, and we've been focusing on the students approaching benchmark because those students are very close in many ways and just trying to provide them with extra instruction to get to where they need to be and to meet the benchmark. We've also have embedded within our day time for additional instruction for both math and literacy. Lauren? So the next few slides are just going to highlight some pieces of that. Jeremy, Catherine, and I all have the same kind of goal setting process, and so we really look at individual teachers when they come in. We look at their individual data. We look at their individual students. We talk about the strategies they're going to be using. And it's a very authentic kind of process to kick off the goal setting process and the school improvement process. You can see here too the school improvement plan. Thanks, Lori. You heard me talk a lot about the IETs, and there's a lot of information on this page because there's a lot of work that is happening at these IETs. We've been very strategic about what data we're looking at that will have the biggest impact on student learning. And so together as a Site or Mill leadership team, our team leaders really look at the data, decide what data sets are going to have the biggest impact and what they want to look at together during their IEP meetings. And we really look at the time we have and play out what data is going to be looked at when, so that we can ensure that across all teams, the data is being looked at, analyzed, and then most importantly, that we're planning instruction responsively. Lori? This is just a little bit more, I won't spend too much time on this. This is just some more of the data that Matt and Chuck were sharing about students meeting benchmark. But this was really important because the teachers also have this data broken down at the classroom level, so they know exactly where each of their learners fall. Lori? Again, this is similar to Miller-Driscoll. So our data looks a little bit different in the upper elementary, but in third grade, I did include the Hagerty as well. As you heard Karen mention, many of our students in third grade missed instruction first grade and second grade. And so we have found that there is some unfinished learning, obviously, in the foundational skills. Phonemic awareness is typically not something that is addressed in Tier 1 in third grade, and that definitely is something that we needed to do this year. And so we are monitoring and have really changed the instruction that's happening in grade 3. Our coaches have also been very strategic in providing coaching support in that area, because many of our teachers, haven't had to navigate that type of instruction before. You can also see that there's a math data that we're looking at. We're going to be looking at IAB data. We're looking at end-of-unit assessment. Where you see C, you can see a unit pre-test and a unit post-test, and you can see actually how the data workbook works. And that basically shows you the growth. Karen did a lot of conditional formatting for us, and so you can actually, it's like a heat map, and we can see very quickly the progress that our students are making with all of the data that we're collecting. So this is just a chart that shows you the students who are receiving additional support or additional instruction. You can see on the left-hand side is our reading, and then the right-hand side is math. I'm going to spend a little bit more time highlighting what we're doing in math. But we are seeing students as we typically have an intervention. And so you can see that's our Tier 2 and Tier 3 in the right-hand column. And then additionally, though, in reading, we have our classroom teachers who are using the WIN block and the accelerated learning block to provide additional instruction to accelerate the learning. And then in math, I'm going to get into sharing with you guys a system that we're using for this year to provide additional instruction during our WIN block to quite a handful of students. You can see underneath the math chart, basically there's about 40 to 45 students every cycle. We're just moving into our third cycle in every grade level that is getting additional instruction, and it corresponds with the upcoming unit, and I'll explain that in a second. All right? Okay, so moving into that additional instruction in math. So basically, we start off the process again at our IEPs, and this is done about 3 weeks before a core unit of study in math. And our interventionists, Jennifer and Katie, are going to meet with all of our teachers, and we also have 2 of 4 0.45 additional support math folks that we've hired. Unfortunately, we've been really struggling with hiring. We still have 2 open positions, but we've been lucky to find 2. So basically, these are the sessions that we're setting up for 2 to 3 weeks based on the length of the unit. And all of our students take a quick check, and that's aligned to the standards and to the math and the back. Go ahead, Lori. And so basically, we administer the quick check, we analyze the quick check data, and then the interventionists really meet with the team to review the student needs and identify about 10 students across the team, each team, who would really benefit from teaching of prerequisite skills. So this is where we're very explicitly filling in gaps before the unit of instruction. Sorry? So basically, the lessons are targeted towards accelerating the learning and focused on the prerequisite skills for students to be successful in the upcoming unit. They attend 4 to 5 sessions of very targeted instruction. And the idea is to really have students conceptualize the math that they're going to be learning in the unit of study. An example. So during the 4 to 5 sessions, there's progress monitoring that is done right there. And in the moment, students are given feedback. Sorry. At the end of the unit, what's really nice is that the feedback doesn't stop there. So this is the sample, what you see up on the chart here, of the feedback that's given at the end of every cycle, so that it's very clear what learning gaps have been closed or what still exists so that the teachers can kind of pick up right where this session left off during the unit of instruction. And I know this has been an amazing collaboration with our math interventionists and our 2 new hires, as well as all of our classroom teachers. It has been a very successful endeavor that they've all worked really, really hard on. Lori? And just some lovely feedback from our students to end it. So this helped me remember how to do partial quotient. I like knowing I had someone to help me, and this helped me with a raise. So just to give you a little bit insight as to what's going on in our classrooms and all the hard work that our folks are doing. Happy to answer any questions. I hope you were able to hear me.
Thanks, Jen.
Jen, we could hear you. Thank you. I have one question instead of me going back and looking through. Can you, the 40 to 45 kids in math in the WIN?
Yep.
Can you, you've got 40 to 45 and then you cycle to another 40 to 45?
Yes, so it's all dependent on the unit. So, you know, any unit, you know what math was like, right? You can be really good in one unit and not so good in another unit.
Yep.
So it's all unit dependent. So we start from scratch based on the quick checks, which follow the unit. So, you know, there may be some overlap, but there may be new groups of students as well.
Okay, so the kids who are maybe underperforming or struggling on those, that's who you're pulling?
Yeah. The quick check,
Whoever's showing that they have gaps for the upcoming unit, that's who we're pulling.
the quick checks are designed to look for prerequisite skills so that in order to judge whether students are ready to engage and learn. So the beauty of giving the quick checks 3 weeks in advance of the start of the unit, it gives the interventionist time to work with those students to fortify those skills so that they are ready to learn the material of the unit.
And I think I heard Jen just say there could be overlap.
Yeah.
We could have kids with
Sure.
first and
Sure.
then second and then, okay. All right, thanks, Jen.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to George. Okay, good evening, and thank you for this opportunity to brag about the incredible efforts of our staff and students at Middlebrook School. And I want to just give some great thanks to our admin team with Nicole Curzay, Toby Kowalis, and Damon Whalen for their continued leadership with our staff. In addition to that, I just want to make sure that I also thank publicly Karen Lamantia, who deserves a raise for not only putting up with me, but being a rock star in everything she does. So I just want to get that out there at the start to let you know I'm really proud to be sitting here in my role. But I'm on the shoulders of some incredible professionals at Middlebrook, and I'm really quite grateful to be able to highlight their work here tonight. So the focus of tonight's update is our work on the action plans for Middlebrook School specific to the acceleration framework that's been ongoing really since this summer. So in slide 2, Lori, thank you for helping us all night, by the way. Tonight what I'll do is I'll share with you where we are at Middlebrook, specifically the adult actions and then the impacts those actions have had on the students' learning. So our district, our building, even our individual goals are all aligned to focus on supporting students. And the collective efforts of all involved are to continue to create and sustain a safe and enriching environment where the students feel supported and cared for. And obviously our efforts to raise that self-efficacy in students to try and really try to do their best rely on that positive learning environment. So in other words, creating that environment where students can be themselves and then also try their best. And once you create that environment, then what? Then we get to work on reaching our academic goals of having our students reach that 80% threshold for students meeting or exceeding grade level standards. For the professionals, the individual goal setting specifically addresses each person's responsibility to be part of that collective effort to achieve the district goals. Teachers, our admin team, coordinators, coaches, interventionists, specialists, we all come together, in fact, to do all of this work. It's really everybody swimming in the same direction. And the greatest focus is really on student well-being and the achievement in math and reading. And the significance is, for example, a science teacher or a world language teacher really truly understanding and being aware
what the students are working on. So if you think of one example might be where a student is struggling to identify evidence that supports a claim in an argumentative text, you think about how a science teacher might be able to support that child. It's again, everybody swimming in the same direction, truly focused attention on supporting student growth. We meet as IETs, you've heard it a number of times, but that's our instructional effectiveness teams. And then we also do it as grade level teams using data to inform instruction. So what does that mean? Slide 3. Hopefully the format is now familiar with you, now that you've seen it for Miller Driscoll and Cider Mill. But what we've done so far is we've introduced that acceleration framework not only to our leadership but also to the certified staff. We've engaged our grade level teams and IETs in the conversation and the planning of how to capture that information, how to identify the students, and then determine the best ways to capture that information for the students. The data review process is ongoing. We've created instruments to capture that information and to drive instruction. And I'll show you a few examples of that in a moment. I just want to take a moment to highlight and celebrate those efforts of those teachers and administrators, because it couldn't be done without everybody's effort. So slide 4 continues that, and you can see that we've introduced the interim assessment blocks, or you may have heard them before, IABs in reading, writing, and social studies. And our humanities department, that includes all of our ELA classes and social studies classes, working in IEPs, participated in a demonstration led by our wonderful humanities coach, Suprata, where they were able to identify areas for adjusted instruction and then plan collaboratively to drive instruction to grow learners. All of our core academic IETs have established protocols for the routine analysis of this performance data, and they're using both standardized test results as well as classroom assessments to do this work. Slide 5 highlights the fact that 100% of our instructional effectiveness teams and grade level teams have engaged in this work, and it's been focused on student performance to drive instruction. You've heard me say that about 3 times, and I wonder if you're getting it. It's purposeful. So you can see the list of professional development opportunities that have already occurred in this first month plus of school. It's highlighted by the IET and grade level work and the tools that they're using to work with students to have that data inform the instruction. And the last piece there is just the wonderful practice of reciprocal observations and conversations that occur throughout the year. It really allows us to tap into the talent and expertise of master teachers. Slide 6, I thought I'd start to introduce the examples of the review and tracking forms we're using, because so much of the work that we're doing is built around the progress of groups of students according to their achievement. And as you've heard me say, there's a grade level team approach and an IET approach that I'll highlight in this next example, slide 7. So for the first example, the IET tracking document, and if you don't mind hitting on that one, WH model. And that's a borrowed from our friends at Wilton High School, hence the proper crediting of the name WHS model. And I'll just briefly go through this form, but really it's to highlight, in addition to what's being assessed and how it's being assessed in this document, teachers can identify the skills that students are struggling with and identify the strategies necessary to respond to those student needs. And there's identified areas for follow-up, for reassessment, and for identifying student growth. The next document on there is relative to the science model, it says, and that basically drills down the same information of student progress as it applies to the next generation science standards, or as you see there, NGSS. Then down below you see the team data collection tool. And I've shared an example here just to demonstrate the depth that our teachers are going to identify the support a child might need. This dated to, by the way, all the names are fictitious. You might recommend, you might see the name John Stamos or William Shakespeare or Beyonce. I do want to highlight that Beyonce's friends are Kelly Rowland and Michelle. For those of you that know who those are. Anyway, I'll shut up and keep going. But this is a dated tool, identifies the specific students and the point person on each team. In other words, the teacher that's on the team who lead and oversee the student's progress. It highlights the data, the areas of concern, the observations, and even in the far right column, the adult actions for follow-up. So you can see it really starts to get very specific at that point. So in slide 8, next slide, is all the work that's being born from this data. We're using the data to inform this practice. Once we've identified the relative strengths and areas of growth, that's where we get to work there. One focus is the students approaching benchmark, and I want to share this example from one of our exemplary teachers. And what he shared is he uses the NWEA MAP growth reports, and specifically the learning continuum, which allows a teacher to select their class, a specific assignment, a specific skill, and then determine which students are going to require reteaching, which are ready to learn a new topic or learn a topic, and then possibly need extra practice to solidify the learning, and then hopefully demonstrate understanding and independence. And I'm going to show you an example of that on the last slide, just to get a view of what it looks like. On slide 9, using the learning continuum, teachers can create temporary groups of students who are ready to access this particular component of a specific standard, and then how to best group or individualize that learning for those students. Another way to illustrate this is the teacher can now get very specific on a student's needs. So for example, specifically informational text instead of saying something it's a language arts concern. And in slide 10, our last slide is really an example of that learning continuum. Don't worry, it's purposely a little bit blurry so we don't get caught up in the specifics of the wording, and also don't worry that those names are fictitious. Just my own disclaimer, but any comparison to any folks that you might know is completely coincidental. But the way to look at this specifically as a quick walk through the sheet is this is an example of the operations and algebraic thinking. And the RIT band is on the left-hand side. You heard Karen describe it a little bit earlier. I just want to expand on her comments in that it's a scale to help measure and compare academic growth. If you will, let's think of it as a zone of proximal development representing where students are ready to learn. So in this example, you see the RIT band is 181 to 190, and the text of the standard is identified in the center there. And what this is identifying is what the students who scored in this RIT band seem to be right in that section, if you will. So one thing I want to point out here is looking at the fictitious Scott Hall student on the right. Again, not a real student. He's third from the bottom there in that blurred writing. And his overall RIT score is a 204, yet he scored in the 181 to 190 band for this content. So it's a nice example of how this learning continuum can be used to identify a relative weakness for this particular student in this content, where targeted practice opportunities will reinforce learning. So, in a real quick, this is the work that's happening across the building. I'm exhausted just talking about it, but I want to end this portion by really publicly celebrating and thanking the staff at Middlebrook for their efforts in doing the heavy lifting here, and they're an incredible lot and certainly deserve the credit. And I'll pause for any questions.
I have one. IABs, are you guys administering IABs in all subject areas?
In all subject areas? No.
They're doing it, they're going to explore doing it in science, but are aligned to the NGSS. We haven't yet decided which in math we're going to use, but they're using in predetermined topics in reading and writing. In math, we have really good aligned end-of-unit assessments and pre-assessments. We also have really refined the practice of doing the spiral reviews, the embedded routine reviews, which support the learning. And we get to check on that, progress monitor that throughout the year. So we also have the 8th grade piloting an individualized practice pathway for students that links the map scores to specific IXL practices. So they've got a lot of efforts going on. We're going to pull in at least a few IABs. We just haven't yet decided exactly which ones we want to implement yet.
Okay. And the IABs that were administered, do you know how long it took the kids to complete?
About an hour.
Yeah.
Okay.
Class period and change on a 40-minute schedule, and at Cider Mill, most students are finishing in one class period and some leading into the second.
The math ones tend to be a little bit shorter because the ones we utilize are called focused IABs. So instead of covering multiple content areas or standards, they focus in on one, what the Smarter Balance Assessment calls a target, which really is one standard domain.
Okay. I do want to emphasize, I'm sorry.
The NGSS IABs are a little bit lengthier.
In ELA, we had planned from last May in grades 3 through 8 to administer 3 IABs. At Middlebrook, social studies decided to take one of those off of the ELA plate to assess research earlier in the year so the team could have access to that data. I want to emphasize that there are only 12 to 15 items. I think the max number of items on any of these assessments is 18.
Okay. So there will be additional IABs later on throughout the school
They're
year?
strategically placed throughout the year, and they're to progress monitor in between our math windows.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Ready to move on to Bob?
Okay, good evening, your Wilton High School Warriors. So tonight we are going to focus solely on our mathematics goal, which is our main growth area at Wilton High School. We have an introduction slide, and then Brian, who's done a great job as our administrative lead in mathematics, is going to talk about the action steps and describe some of the work. In short, he's going to bring the work to life. One of the things that we want you to see this evening is that our math teachers are dedicated, they are skilled, they are working concertedly to implement our strategic plan and to maximize student learning. They have really embraced this work, and we cannot commend them enough. We have added some detailed updates on the action steps for you. We won't talk specifically to them tonight because you can just read them, but we've got some good specifics for you. And I also want to share with the Board of Ed that we're building and we'll be introducing soon an additional math support program for students, juniors, who are approaching benchmark on the SAT. So we're going to work concertedly with them. It's the Horizon Education full-length SAT prep program, and the focus will be to some extent on content, but also test-taking strategies, which some of our students need. Finally, we're going to show you a very short video clip of one of our Algebra 2 data team IETs that took place earlier this week, and I think you'll be excited to see the work, and we'll bring that to light for you. So on slide 1, Jim, you'll see once again that our theory of action is built entirely around the accelerated learning framework that has been driving the work in all of our departments, but specifically in mathematics this evening. Our teachers are designing and implementing high-quality, what we call CFAs, Common Formative Assessments, that really provide data for the teachers to analyze and then use those to facilitate student growth. We have seen direct evidence of these in our goal meetings with the teachers and also in our classrooms. The math teachers are deeply engaged in the data team work around classroom performance results, and you will see that around the Horizon test administration that we administered to our juniors, which we're talking about specifically tonight. And the data team work in math, it is a work in progress, but it is becoming more robust, and you'll see evidence of that tonight in this video clip. These current academic tasks across all departments, but certainly in mathematics, they definitely reflect grade level work. There is no question about that. I've been in a lot of math classrooms. Dr. Chuck Smith and I went around math classrooms recently. We saw deep engagement with the students and very good work. The students are being challenged, and there's a lot of evidence of really good cognitive engagement at this point in the school year. So the teachers are certainly scaffolding the work to support different student learning needs across the spectrum, and that is important to make the learning accessible to our students, help all of them excel incrementally. And then finally, this big piece of it, we're monitoring progress, making adjustments based on the performance data, and we're really trying to take this on and accelerate student growth in mathematics. So Brian is going to bring the process that we've been living to life, and then we're going to actually display it for you, and you'll see some of our teachers engaging in some data teamwork. So Brian, thank you for your leadership in the mathematics department.
Cool, thanks, Bob. So another way for me to describe what's on the next few slides is to say, when we met in September and we talked about coming up with our action steps and putting them into gear, making them a reality, we knew that we wanted to be aggressive with the work that we were undertaking. So prior to October 12th, we decided as a math department that we were going to administer a Horizon diagnostic test. So for those of you who aren't exactly sure what I'm talking about when I say Horizon, or any of us are, Horizon Testing Services is a company that we use as a district, and they replicate the SAT or the PSAT. They use released SAT questions. They make it accessible electronically. They offer different bells and whistles that a teacher needs to administer it electronically in class. And then they also help us collect that data. So we did give that to nearly all 11th graders, and that's not an easy task because not all 11th graders are in the same math class. And we accepted a few kids out of that diagnostic testing because when we looked at their PSAT scores from last year, they were extremely high. Those are our kids that are in our AP Calc BC classes. So we administered this within 1 week time across all the 11th grade students, and Matt helped to collect that data, and Trudy then helped to analyze the types of questions that were asked. We then passed that information on to our instructional coaches. I can't thank Matt and Trudy enough for their work, but I would be remiss if I didn't thank just as equally Michelle Marr and Eric Mendelson. Their work has been tremendous in helping get information easily and quickly to teachers who have been devouring what they've been creating. And I really can't sing their praises enough. So with that, the math department then took a look at a spreadsheet that Michelle and Eric created with the help of Matt and Trudy, and Lori, thank you. We can go on to the next one. So, an aerial view of part of the spreadsheet. As you can imagine, taking a look at all of the 11th graders would be difficult to do in one image, but wanted to let you know that this is just one area of the spreadsheet that we looked at. Obviously, student names and teacher names have been taken off of this for tonight's meeting, but when we met as a department, everybody had all of that information, and we did two things. I asked teachers to look across at all of their students so that they could see the scores that were color-coded. Yellow obviously would mean that the students were, as you move from left to right, that greatest batch of students that you see in color-coded in yellow, those were students who were approaching the benchmark. So the scores were converted to something that was equivalent to SAT scores. These are students that weren't meeting the benchmark. We were then able to take a look at which questions they got correct or incorrect. The green represents a correct answer, the red represents an incorrect answer. So if a teacher looked across at all of their students, they were able to see not only the percent and whether or not they were above or below standard, but where those students individually had struggles. We then took a look, and I asked teachers to look down the columns because over to the right, each column represents a question. And those questions could then be grouped with the help of Trudy's analysis of the types of questions. We could see what types of topics, math topics, our 11th graders were struggling with. So we followed a certain protocol to get into the data, and it proved rather worthwhile. This was all now on October 12th at our IET meeting. Again, if you can move on. So one thing that you'll notice there, that wasn't all 11th graders. And that band of yellow students, or the students that were highlighted in their scores in yellow, what we found is that we had 23 students in our Algebra 2 class that were approaching benchmark or in that yellow range, 57 that were in the Algebra 2 class. We had 13 students in our pre-calc class, our college algebra students, there were 6, and that gave us a total of 99 students that on the Horizon Testing Service Administration were approaching the benchmark. It should be noted that in total, though, we had 144 students that were below benchmark, right? There's a difference between below benchmark and approaching benchmark. We had 99 students that were approaching benchmark. So this was really our effort to take a look at not only all the students that needed help, but which topics would it behoove us to focus on so that we could move the greatest number of students, or in other words, improve learning at high growth rates for the highest number of students possible. So a quick synopsis of this instead of reading it all to you. So we took a look at that in a way that I just described, across the spreadsheet and down the spreadsheet. And some things that we noticed, that's what's in the bulleted area. We noticed that we did have some areas of focus as a department, and they're listed there. Again, not to read them to you, but this allowed the entire math department, not just those people who taught 11th grade, but everybody, to take a look at where students, 11th grade students this year prior to October 12th on the Horizon test, showed signs of struggle. And again, another thing to note that came out of this examination on the 12th was a number of teachers said that they were surprised with how many students they had in their class that were those goal huggers, or those ones that were very, very close to meeting benchmark, just need a little bit of a push to get above benchmark. And another thing that was noticed that is worthwhile to mention is that a large number of students didn't actually complete the test. And at the same time that I say that, it was not rigorously timed. It was rather loosely timed, so students could go back to it another time or if they needed to. So interesting to note that as well. If you could go on. Okay, so then taking it past October 12th. And the reason why we wanted to explain what we did after October 12th is because this really explains what a data team cycle has looked like for us. So our instructional effectiveness teams have adopted, especially in the math department, a data team approach. So what we did was, after taking a look at that information on October 12th, IETs were then given the task to determine in their smaller groups what areas of focus they wanted to pay attention to with their students. And they also agreed upon how they were going to give another measure of that, and they agreed upon what strategies they would try. And I think that's the important thing. Out of the data that we examined, teachers then had discussions about what they thought the best strategies would be to improve growth for students. From October 21st to November 2nd, that's when our math teachers engaged in that. So from that time on, from the 20th on, that's when teachers were asked to go back into their classrooms, not forget about the curriculum that they needed to cover, but incorporate other types of teaching with the strategies that they had agreed upon so that they could talk about it on November 2nd. And that was just 2 days ago, as you know. So 2 days ago on November 2nd, all of our math department met and we split up into our separate IETs. We did ask the department to focus this part of the year on breaking up into the different groups that work with 11th graders so that we could effectively use our time to really focus on getting some growth for the 11th graders especially. And we do have the video like Bob had mentioned, and what you'll see in that one is that the teachers had come to that IET on November 2nd having already examined and scored the student work. But the direction that I had asked them to follow was that they would get together on the 2nd and look at the student work that they had gathered. So some of the IET teams, in fact most of them, were ahead of schedule, which was lovely. And I think a testament to how invested they are in the growth that we want the students to have. And what they did was they took a look at this data. They compiled it into one central area for each IET. They discussed what happened when they implemented those strategies, and they have then, at the end of the meeting, and you'll see it in the video, but at the end of the IET on Tuesday, They determined which strategies they thought were best. They said that they were ready to move on to having a post-test assessment, and they, depending on what that information shows, they are ready to move on to the next data cycle or the next area of focus or the next math topic that they think students need to work on. So they're lined up to enter into yet another cycle of looking at student success or student struggle and implementing strategies and collecting data on it. So in essence, that's what I have on this slide. So again, I wouldn't necessarily want to read this to you, but just so that you are aware, these are some of the things that came out of it. And I'll highlight some down towards the bottom. Teachers were able to compare their results. The Algebra 2 team was able to compare the results that they had based on the strategies they used. They were also able to theorize about why they got certain results. They were also able to talk about what to do with a situation where only 4 out of 24 kids got an answer wrong. You still want to pay attention to the 4 out of 24 that got the answer wrong. So it also allowed them to talk about some personalization of going forward for certain students. Another important thing, and this was mentioned before by Trudy and just about everybody else, but it also gave them a chance to talk about how they intend to spiral review that information, which students, we don't want them to forget in the coming months before we lead up to the March SAT. And really, just for learning in general, for them not to ever forget, right? To make the learning in concrete. I would ask that, yep, this is what Bob was saying before. These are, again, from a larger scope, these are the actions that we've taken as a math department. I would just add that we could say very similar things across all departments and across the school, but these are some of them, and they're there for you to read, but we have updated those. And then, without wasting too much more time here, we talked about this, so we have our math support program that we're going to be offering to students that will be below benchmark. So, Lori, just one more time before you click on this. The reason why we thought it would be good to show you this short clip from the meeting is because this is what the teachers are doing in action. This is what it looks like when they analyze the data and they set a course to improve the student performance. And I just want to thank the participants. I will thank Bob because he was there, but he wasn't necessarily part of the math IET. Evelyn Sable is one of our instructional leaders in the math department, and she starts us off here, but also joining her in our Algebra 2 IET group is Chris Schbach, Emily Fodor, Jeff Ferry, Joe Brady, and Patty Berkowitz. And I would just like to note that Patty Berkowitz is one of our special education teachers, but all special education teachers at the high school have joined IETs, so she lends her certain expertise to the discussion too. So I'm done talking, we'll let the teachers talk.
The strategy, I did it in the Untitled format, so I presented them with an SAT problem. Not necessarily similar to systems, but just, and I said don't even solve it, so I want to know the steps, right? And what you're thinking is write that down. And then we talked about it as a whole. The second time I did it, I said, okay, if you can solve this, go ahead and solve it. Because, I mean, that's good data anyway. I said, but if you can't, don't just sit there. I said, I want you to talk about what you think. I said, there's nothing wrong, there's no right or wrong, but what you think you would do, and let's have a discussion about that. So that's how I approached it. It clearly made a difference on the first one, but number two, so after we discussed what strategies we used, I think we should talk about what went wrong on the second question or why. All right, so anybody else do anything different?
I did something a little bit different. I ended up giving my kids the packet that Emily had put together with 9 questions based on linear systems. And I had them do that on their own, talk to each other a little bit about it, and then we went over as a class, each one. And similar to what you said, I went over the first question and asked the kids what type of question is it, how would we approach it, and then what the answer would be after that. So it kind of went through that let's look at the problem, let's analyze it first prior to just jumping in. And based off of how my class did on the systems one, it showed great improvement. The other one, not so much, but I think that one's a little bit harder because it's the multi-step. Right. For the systems one, although it might be multi-steps, it's still a little bit easier. For the second one, it's almost like two completely separate problems.
I know, because that's, yeah, and I know we're going to talk more about that. And we focus so much on that, like systems was what they were working on a project. So they were really just used to that line of questioning and that line of thinking.
So what we were focusing on more saw improvement in this, and what we kind of focused on a little bit less, but still may have touched upon slight improvement in some classes, but not a major improvement.
And we're going to have to circle back to systems, right? Because just because they're getting it now, we want to make sure, because that's we know that they can lose it if we don't write the language, if we don't practice it. Anybody else?
I did the same thing as Kristen, but also, again, focused on the type of problem, obviously, with the system, but also what else can they possibly ask within the problem.
Oh, that was good. So you project, what else could you see?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. We kind of, brainstormed or made us a list of saying, okay, well, yes, you can solve the systems and find out, X and Y value, but then we can ask, and one of them did, D over M, I believe it was. So you can ask, dividing the slope by the y-intercept. We could ask to add, we could ask to subtract, to multiply. Could you ask, a value, an f of x value? So I think that was, kind of a good point to...
That is, because I always talk to them about when you study, not just study exactly what we've asked you, think of what we could ask you, and then try to answer.
That's what I guess.
I think the other thing I also brought up, and something we've been talking about, these types of problems aren't just do this problem done. There's a second part, a second whole thing you have to do. So making sure that kids read the whole question and they don't read the first part, there's my answer, the answer's right there, I'm done. And instead of now take the view that you just found and the end that you just found and divide them. Because the answer to B and M are probably there.
Well, that's what I tried to do with my kids. When I did the direct instruction piece, I had them, because I had it on paper, I had them circle what the question was actually asking. So I had them say, okay, it's a systems question, and I was like, okay, now we know it's a system, but what is it asking for? Is it asking you to just solve the system or do something with the answers? So that was the big part for me. And then eliminating the answers that make no sense, so you can only focus on the ones that would work.
Another thing that we did that a couple of you mentioned was, in a couple of problems we did were multiple choice, and we said, what would be the answers that you think the SAT would put down as the choices, and why? So like, hey, here's the X value of the intersection, here's the Y value of the intersection. Oh, that's not what they're asking. You just said that before. Like, it was solve and then do something else with it. But we want them to really, I didn't have them circle the question like you did, but I think that would be something that I would do the next time. Say, hey, circle what they're actually asking for. Yeah. So that you recognize that, yes, there may be one or two answer choices that look like the correct one, but they're not answering the actual question.
I think the hard part is that are they transitioning the SAT or SAT to digital? So I think what you said was look at the problem, figure out what you know how to do, see if you can do that for the problem, and then figure out how does that apply to the question.
So could that be our next strategy, the keywords? I know you used it, but could that be the teaching strategy for the next cycle? All right, let's try this, because talking about what to do, it made a difference on one of them, but it didn't on the other, so we have to come up with another strategy.
It does kind of speak to the need for spiral review, right? Yeah. If when we're in the thick of a unit, things are going well and we're seeing improvement, but that carryover piece needs to be over time. We've got to work in that spiral review, and I think really look at our kiddos that missed it because they answered the wrong question, or missed it because there was a calculation error, or missed it so that we can maybe then do some small group instruction in class and really target where, the specific need that each of those groups have.
The only other thing I would add is, as you can tell, they're talking about strategies, they're concerned about growth, they're setting a course for how they're going to get there, evident just in their words. So
thank you.
Any questions?
I don't have questions.
All right, so I hope that we've given some transparency to the work that we're doing, and we feel reassured that we are trying our best to address the issue. And we'll be coming back on a regular basis to update you on this.
And
Any comments?
the next round of tests are January, end of January?
On the map, yeah.
On the map, end of January, okay.
And we'll need a week or two to summarize them and do the kind of work that we showed you today.
Oh, no, you should have it as soon as they're done taking it.
So I would anticipate towards the end of January.
End of January, okay.
Yeah, if I may. It's clear that we have an overwhelming amount of data and information about how our students are doing, where they're doing well, what they're doing poorly on, et cetera, et cetera. And it, to me, it's just mind-boggling. Being a teacher today is no easy task. I mean, they are overwhelmed with data and information to give them direction, and to all of you who the principals of the presentations tonight, to Chuck and Matt and Trudy, it's overwhelming. And I think I don't know how many parents are watching tonight or will watch, but they've got to feel confident about the fact that we know what we're doing. We've got the information, we know how our students are doing, and we're focusing on that and making them better. And that's encouraging. It really is. I think being a teacher in Wilton today is not an easy task at all. And tonight's presentation just really magnifies that, in my opinion. And thank you all for doing it. It's remarkable. It really is. You've got a grip on it.
Thanks.
Yeah, I first of all, I'm going to echo for the whole board, our thanks and appreciation for how comprehensive, detailed, and I know that we've gone over our traditional time limit, so I appreciate all the work, the hours that went in behind the scenes, and each of the individual classroom teachers, which is, where the rubber meets the road kind of thing. The beginning of the report with all the test scores just showed us the tremendous amount of work and the challenge that we absolutely have to address in moving, getting significant improvement as part of, our sort of board oversight thing. And, the approach, and so it helps to understand the approach, because we're putting all our eggs in this basket. But we saw your level of expertise. We know how much assessment's going on. And I think, to Glenn's point, their underlying question would be, is there a little too much data? But then we have the curriculum people to analyze it, tear it apart, and turn it into those heat maps, which make it much more user-friendly, which is important. And then the instructional planning and the teacher time. I think we're hearing that teachers also work there as a team. We just saw it at the high school. So it's not just what's in their brain, it's what's in their colleague's brain. So there's a richness of expertise that comes together. And it's all sort of on a very strict calendar. So I'm just, knock on wood or whatever, it seems like you're bringing all the right tools to the task, and you're all incredibly skilled at it. And it's going to take some time, and it's going to take some, reporting. So I think, and it was actually, Ruth was talking in my ear as we were coming in today, will there be a mid-course correction if it needs to happen? Are you going to be prepared for that? So I think, I didn't mean to steal your question,
No.
Ruth, but I think that stuck in my head as I was listening to this too. That we also need to be nimble if we need to be once we see the January results. Okay. All right, but back to our.
I found it encouraging.
Yeah, good.
The presentation, that I think we've agreed upon this approach, and we've embarked upon, fully executing it. And I think that that's just my one concern come January. If things don't improve the way we want to, are we going to be flexible and nimble enough to pivot a bit quickly? In the sense that we don't lose any time kind of figuring out, what that could possibly look like or be, or kind of thinking ahead of time of what resources that may require. But I also find the approach encouraging, and the increased collection of data and this student level information for beyond this accelerated learning framework of post-COVID, but into more normal moving times where we want to then pick up where we left off and then also do more and better. So I think that these are tools that can help, help carry over and carry through.
Absolutely.
So I think that I'm glad to hear the enthusiasm for them, and the fact that, administrators to teachers are finding it helpful and meaningful and not feeling burdened or overwhelmed by it. And I just want to also make sure that our teachers have the tools that they need to really be able to use the material in a way that's most helpful for them.
And I heard bits of in there also, and maybe we're adding this a little bit, of the test questions, preparing for the SBA and the SAT, and just in terms of, just adding a little bit more of that, like understanding that kids need to anticipate, to not be surprised by the format of the questions. And so a little bit of that ahead of time, without turning it into test prep course. But they still need that familiarity, and trying to get that balance is probably challenging, but I'm glad to hear that some of that language is embedded in the environment.
I think the IEBs, we were watching it the other day, and yes, there's test prep, but the test items are structured in such a way that they want kids to think a certain way.
Yeah.
And it's really important for teachers to understand what the test is asking kids to think about. So that, I keep saying I have a favorite term, task predicts performance. So the tasks that we use in the classroom should predict how they do on the test, right? So I think it was an eye-opener, at least for me, and I'm sure for the teachers, to see what kind of thinking is this assessment really asking of our kids? And are we making sure that kids can be successful when they're asked to do that kind of thinking?
Any other questions, comments? All right, well, the hour is late, and I really appreciate the staff attention and staff work and making the day one of the longer ones of the year.
Yes.
So,
It's remarkable.
so thank you. Thank you. Okay. Given the hour, capital operating tools is tonight. Probably should be.
I think here's what I would propose. There are two policies on for review and discuss. You have them in 3 seconds. The first one, the attendance of non-resident students. I'm just looking to have this policy grant a little discretion. This year we've had many, many more families moving in. Many have moved in from across the country, and some of them have expressed hardship given the way this policy's crafted. So I'd like to have some discretion to respond to families as those issues come up. So I think that's the summary. We can discuss this more on the 18th, and then, if it's okay with you, I'll move it to an action item, but if you're not ready to take action, you don't have to take action.
Yeah, so we can go ahead and just throw the questions, because it is technical. And
Yeah.
I think the specific example is if somebody has a sales agreement, give Kevin the right to say, okay.
Yeah, that's it. The second one, there's a lot of editing in that policy, but the crux of it is the law changed around immunization requirements for our youngest learners. We took the opportunity to add that language, but also to clean up the policy. So the language that you see now in the health assessment immunization policy really came directly from the Shipman and Goodwin model policy. So we can feel confident that it fully conforms and accurately conforms with the law. And it's, again, highly technical. I'll move it forward on the next agenda, but we can have ample time then to discuss it.
Okay, appreciate that. All right, the capital operating proposal, Glenn, you sort of summarized some of that.
Yeah,
and
I
we've been
think we
talking
could
about
move on
that.
that very quickly. We've discussed it,
Right.
at
Is there
length.
wording
I
for
would
that?
move that we approve the proposal that, I get to the page here.
Yeah, we have the motion here, Glenn.
Okay, can you just read that?
Um,
Motion, action.
Yeah, I would move that we approve the capital operating proposal for the Board of Education expenditures, which means that it does, in fact, go to the Board of Selectmen and is designated for the Board of Ed. It will be for a 5-year period. It will protect us and ensure that we get all the capital projects that we have under this, they happen, they get done. So I would move that we adopt that proposal.
And can you add as presented in the briefing summary?
As presented in the briefing summary.
It's got more of the technical
Right.
language.
Okay.
Is there a second? Is that a second, or was that just a stretch?
Am I so moved, personally?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that okay? All right. Any other questions, discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Great.
Any opposed? No. Okay, great. Future business items, you can see that we have more coming up, next meeting, et cetera. Comments from the public? Any in-person comments from the public? Any more comments?
Nothing came to me. I haven't
Okay.
checked, and if there
All
are
right,
some,
and
we
if
can
so,
pick
we'll
it up
put it
next
on the
meeting.
next one. All right, we have gotten through our agenda, so I am adjourning the meeting. Thank you, everybody.